welcome back everybody. We're doing our design patterns library and I want to show you some changes that I've made and then I'm going to walk you through how I did it. So if you look here, the thing we're going to start aiming towards is we're going to add a page nav. I haven't done that yet. You might check your design pattern library. You'll notice all my fonts are just slightly smaller. I'll explain in a moment. Anyway, so in the case of the home page, I decided to change it to say typography and not home because we're just going to start with typography and we're going to have links to UI elements and media. But under typography, I want to just show you what it might look like. So we're going to have a section for our headers and I wanted to show both output and code. And then you look a little bit further down, you have paragraphs, and then we have a couple paragraphs. And then I've got some other sections for lists, for tables, and some other typography elements that you may have, including block level elements and inline elements. Okay, so all that being said, let's talk about what I did to style this and walk you through the code that I've done. So let's go to the project. The first thing I did is I thought all of my headers looked too big. So what I did is applied some Bootstrap classes. Okay, when you use Bootstrap 4, and I believe they had this on Bootstrap 3, maybe even 2, is for each header, you can give a class and style the header to look like a different header. So what I've done is I've scaled down all of my headers by 1. So my header 1, which is the most important header for the title, I gave it a class of H2 so it would look like a header 2, thereby making it a little bit smaller. And I did it consistently across the board. So every one of my headers, it has a class that's slightly smaller. And I did that just so it wouldn't be so big. Okay, let's scroll down and let's take a look at the article. And that's really where most of the HTML, that's pretty much all the HTML I did, other than that one little class of header 2. So let's open it up and let's take a look at each sort of the sections and kind of like the way I structured it. I started with the header 2 and I gave it a class of H3, so it's a little smaller. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have different sections, and each section is going to be a header 2 with a class of header 3, and it's going to have an ID. We're going to use this ID so my navigation bar on my sidebar will be able to target all the sections on the page. So you have this H2, class H3, ID equals headers, like so that we can, with a hyperlink, go straight to headers and show that on the page. Now, so we'll deal with that in my next video. But let's just talk about how I did it. So I wanted to show you how you could set up both the output as well as set up the code. So let's look at the HTML for a little bit. Okay. So notice, of course, now I have a header 3 with a class of H4 that says output. So I want to show what the output's going to look like on my design patterns. The whole point of a design pattern library is so you can see what it is. All right, and so let's look at that. So basically, I gave it a header 1 with a class of H1 and a header 2, and I matched the class to the header because I wanted to display correctly. And then I just wrote the text header, what level it was, and then what class it was. All right, so that you can see. Now, another thing you may want to do is you might want to do another section where you want to put like H1 class equals H3. And it will put header 1 with a class of .h3. And let's save our changes and see what that looks like. Because I wanted to show you if I hit refresh. So there's a header 1 with a class of header 3. So what I may want to do is actually put some headers to sort of block this, you know, like a mix and match. So I could do this as a header 4 now with a class of header 5. Okay, and then I'll put so mixing and matching headers with classes. Save our changes. Hit refresh. Now this we may want to break it out and be its own separate one. So I think I'm going to do that right now. So I'm going to cut this for a moment and go back to where we were. Okay. The other thing what I did is I put everything on my output as well as my code in a figure tag, and I gave it a class of sample output. So let's do that again. I'm going to paste the header 4, mix and match. okay? And then I'm going to put right here standard headers. I'll put normal size. And then mixing and matching headers with classes. And then what I want to do is put a figure here. Wrong tag. Do the figure tag with a class. And that was sample output. And then, oops. Now what I can do, H3 class 1, H2 class equals H1. Like so, hit refresh, and now we got the mixing and matching headers with classes, etc. Okay. So that's kind of how we worked this out. So that's the figure with the class of sample output. So while I'm on the HTML and I showed you the figure, one of the things you'll notice, the figure now has a border around it with a different background color. So the style over here, I styled both the sample output class as well as the sample code with the exact same CSS. Gave it some padding, gave it a background color, made it nice and light, gave it a border, 1 pixel solid. I made it a slightly darker color than the background color, and I gave it a border radius. Excuse me for my hiccup there. And so that's how I styled both the sample output and sample code, and that's the only CSS I've done since the last tutorial. All right, so let's take a look at the HTML one more time. And now one of the things I want to do, and I realized I didn't do this well, is I'm going to cut this, because the reason why I want to cut it is I want to have the output go with the sample here. So you have this code, so you have output, code, standard headers. Now that I think about it, I think we should mix this up just a little bit. I think what we need to do is cut this. I already did a cut, now I have to do a paste. Lest I forget. Paste. All right, we'll come back to that in just a moment. I realize standard headers, normal size. I'm going to cut that, and I'm going to put that up here. And then my output will be in the header 4. And the code will also be a header 4 with a class of H5, making that a header 4. Okay, so that output, code. Okay, save our changes. Let's look at this now, hit refresh. So now we have the output, we have the code. Okay, so it's getting a little bit cleaner. I like the way that's laid out. And you can see we obviously can shift things around with a simple cut and paste. Let's look at the sample code, because let's start with the output. And you notice we've got here, we can see our angle brackets, but they're not being treated as the header levels 1. Oh, I already found a little mistake I have here. We're going to clean that up while we go through it. First of all, everything's in a code tag. Code tag, in this case, this is Bootstrap, gives it a pink color and a monospace font. Okay, and at some point we're going to either override that or come up with our own style or add to the style. You'll notice you have a code tag around all of your code. To show the angle brackets but not have them behave as an angle brackets, what we did is we replaced this angle bracket, which is technically a less than sign, with the ampersand LT semicolon. And that's what's called an HTML entity. And that will display as an angle bracket. The GT is for greater than, and it's the closing angle bracket. Everything else is pretty much the same. So we get the header level 1 class of, and then this would be the closing header tag right here. We have the LT, that's an angle bracket. You keep the slash, that's normal. You write H1, you do the GT, then you close the code and you add a break to your tag. All right, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit, and let's move this over so it's all nice and clean. And we'll notice here we forgot to put level 3, level 4, level 5, level 6. Okay, so there's the code, and let's take a look at the output. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I want you to see in here, there's the code. So we're going to highlight the first one here, and that's this right here. So one of the things you may want to do is you might want to take a look and examine how these line up. Okay, so you notice you can see the angle brackets, and the LT is for the opening angle bracket, GT is for closing angle bracket, and that allows us to see it as a code. We had to put the break tags in here to do a line break, so each one of these appears on their own line. Now, I could have used a different tag called the pre-tag, but I chose not to do it. And the reason why is the pre-tag is kind of a pain. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to add a pre-tag here, and I'm going to surround everything with the pre-tag, and I'll show you why. I don't do it this way. I'm going to save my changes, and I'm going to hit refresh. And you're just going to want to see this. Notice everything's tabbed over now, like so. And the reason why the pre-tag stands for pre-formatted. If you have a tab here or a line return, it shows on there. So what you would have to do on here for the pre-tag to work is you'd have to shift tab till all of this is on the left, breaking your lovely visual code. And then when you're done, notice they all line up right. Plus we don't have the color code. So I decided to dispense with the pre-tag and not use it at all. Now, you could, with CSS, you could go in and change that pre-tag to display a little differently. So it's not like you can't do it. So if you want to do the pre-tag, you go for it. But honestly, I recommend just doing it the way I did here with the code. Okay, so there's how we set it up. So let's look at the HTML a little bit one more time. I want to just kind of close this for a moment, just so you can see how this is working. So I'm using headers as standard. So like, as we mentioned here, headers right here, and then I have a couple subsections of headers. We have standard headers and mixing and matching headers. So what I'd like to do now is I'm just going to do two more things. I want to just show you how I would go about trying to speed up my time here. I want to show you the mix and match that we did before, where we had our figure, class, sample, output. Now, you may do more of these. I just want to show you what the output and then how I do the code. So what I would do here is go ahead. I just grab these. You got the header for the code. I'm just going to copy that, paste it there. I want to get that header 4 that had the output, do like I did there. So I'm just going to make use of copy and paste. This is the way you want to go about this. So you already did the mixing and matching header we put in here. So we have a header 4 for the output, a header 4 for the code. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this. Now, I recommend you do a couple other things here. Let's just add one more. We'll do a header 3, class of H5, for example, just to kind of give you an example of ways that we could go about this. Just to show some variety, okay? So I already have this figure, and it has the output, so it has the tag. So what I want to do is I'm just going to copy this and paste it in for my code. So I have it here, but instead of sample output, I'm going to do sample code, I believe is how I did it. Am I right? Yeah, sample code. So I target that, and then I just need to change all my brackets. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to do a Control F, which is a find and replace. And I'm going to replace that with LT semicolon. So a find and replace is a good way to do it. Be careful. If I were to accidentally click replace all, I'd screw up the whole page. So what I want to do is I want to click find. And let me go back a step. Oh, it doesn't show me how to do this step. I'm just going to click replace, 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 and stop, okay? And I forgot to do it there, so I'm going to highlight that and click replace. See, whatever you highlight becomes that. Okay, so that was that. So now what I want to do is replace this. So I'm going to highlight it, do Control F. Right away you can see it, change that. And I want to change that to GT. I have it highlighted right here, so I'm going to click replace. Didn't like that. I wanted to go here, so I'm going to highlight this and click replace. There we go. So I get replace, 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 replace. Okay, stop. So I'm just doing that. So find and replace is a great way to go about this. I'm going to save my changes. Now, all I have to do is get on the sample code from before is get that code tag. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to paste and paste and paste. And then I want to close the code with the break. Copy that. I want to paste and paste. I'm going to paste it here and then get rid of the break. Okay, I'm going to close the find and replace. So in the end, all you have to do is copy that figure and then go in, add your code tag on either side, change your greater than, lesser than sides to the HTML entities, add your breaks, save your changes, and let's take a look at how this is coming across. Hit refresh, go here, let's do full screen so you can kind of see that. So you have the standard headers here, output, code, scroll down. We got mixing and matching headers with classes. Output, code, there you go. So you have the output and the code. The only thing I recommend you do is probably you may want to add some paragraphs to explain what's going on. Okay, so I would write some paragraphs to explain what's going on each of these. I would put my explanation right after the header 2 that has an ID for headers. Or you could put one under standard headers, and you could put another one under mixing and matching. Now, one of the things I noticed, standard headers is a header 3, and here I accidentally put a header 4. That was supposed to be 3. I thought that looked odd. So make sure you're careful about that. I apologize if I made it more confusing. When we hit refresh there, mixing and matching now is bigger in size, etc. Okay, so that gives you an idea. And for the next tutorial, I'll show you what I came up with lists, tables, etc. on the HTML. But I think you can kind of figure this out from here. In my next tutorial, what I want to show you is how to create a navigation bar that will navigate within the page that you have here. So stay tuned for that video.